Hi, welcome back to Jonesy Chats Wrestling. Once again, I'm here with another video, and I'm joined by a special guest yet again, becoming a regular co-host, none other than Josh Hayes. How are you today, Josh?
I'm good, man. I was about to say the same thing. Like at this point, I'm kind of taking on the co-host duties or whatever.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just we're here today. Obviously, we're going to discuss this past week's Raw and what's going on in wrestling stuff. A couple of things that are going to be coming up on the show. You're going to have Raw review, kind of what we thought was good, not so good, where they're going with Survivor Series, some early predictions for next week as well, the big title match next week, and lots of other stuff. Please don't forget to give the video a like, give it a share, give it a comment if you agree or disagree. But let's kind of get to it then. Obviously, so we had this past week's Raw, and that one's obviously it's going from the Thunderdome yet again in the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida. The video obviously starts up with Miz TV. Miz comes out. It's basically coming out to hype his whole Miz TV, his whole Mr. and Mrs. TV show. We then get kind of Randy Orton come out. Orton says that he's in a six-man tag team match tonight that he's agreed to because he gets his hands on Drew McIntyre. Miz trashed. He basically then trashed the Miz by saying that he hasn't done anything since the last 10 years he cashed in, and they kind of bickered, if that makes sense. What did you kind of make of this opening segment?
I gotta tell you, and just so everybody's watching, this is gonna set the pace for a lot of what I say for this week's episode of Raw. I thought that opening segment was very good. I like segments and triple threat, fatal four-way matches. I like ensemble segments and matches where everyone plays their part very well. And I thought everybody in this opening segment did. When I first heard about the main event, I thought, because Miz and Morrison have kind of been feuding with Drew McIntyre too. So I thought, it's Orton, Miz, Morrison against McIntyre, and they just kind of threw the New Day in. But they even addressed that. They mentioned, like, Miz, because Orton's very paranoid about Miz cashing in. And Miz is like, no, Randy, like, our focus, Morrison and I, we're focusing on the New Day because we're going to go after the Raw tag team titles. And I was like, man, this is good. And so you had the Miz, like he's, he's lying. Or you get the vibe he's lying to Randy Orton that he can't be trusted. Orton comes out. I like the aggressive hotness of Randy Orton. It was very good. New Day come out and do their shtick, which, a lot of people complain that New Day have done the same gimmick for 6 years. But honestly, as long as the context changes, I'm cool with Xavier Woods and Kofi being how they are. Then last, you have McIntyre come out. You do the spot where, they're teasing this tension between Morrison, Miz, and Orton, but they work together to take out Drew McIntyre. I thought, honestly, Raw doesn't always set up their main event very well. A lot of times they just announce them the main event and there's maybe one promo, then you have the main event and that's it. But this opening segment, if you're watching, it makes you want to stay tuned to see this main event at the end of the show. And that's what every episode of wrestling should do. I thought it was great.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think looking at it, my thoughts, I think it was a good opening segment. What I like about it is you've got the tag team champions there in the New Day, the Money in the Bank winner there, or the Money in the Bank briefcase holder now at the moment in there as well. You've also got your two main wrestlers on Raw at the moment, I would say, in Randy Orton and Drew there. And I think it's a great way that they built up the main event from the get-go. I think it was very much of a bit nostalgic. They used to do this on Raw all the time back in the early 90s where they would sort of build up the main event at the start of the night. You knew what you're getting. I really kind of like this. I thought it was a fun dynamic. It was a brave move from WWE to have these people in the main event again. I felt certain participants in it again. Obviously, last week they had Drew versus the Miz and Morrison, and that kind of wasn't particularly great. The ratings were obviously awful with that, but I like this. It's something different, and clearly you're getting everybody that's integral in Survivor Series on this spot. It was a fun segment. Have you got anything else to add before I move into the next segment?
No, man, I just I think maybe they did look at last week's ratings and they were like, we need to find a way to keep people hooked in the third hour. So let's advertise something in the third hour in the first segment of the show. That is probably the thought process that went behind that. And like I said, that should be episodic wrestling show 101. You want to open the show with, letting them know what the grand finale will be. Because otherwise, as a fan, what is my incentive to stay hooked for 3 hours, man?
Yeah, definitely. I think it did kind of what it needed to do in that respect. We then went into a video clip. It's going to be The Undertaker's final farewell at Survivor Series on November the 22nd. Before I kind of go into my thoughts of that, what's your thoughts of this final farewell?
I'm looking forward to it. I do think it would be good at some point this year because, they did the same thing when the Shield were breaking up. When word comes out that someone's going to leave or retire, WWE has this bad habit of just giving them a dozen different farewells. Like we saw the Last Ride documentary and Undertaker announced his retirement there. And so they've been drawing it on, but I mean, Undertaker does need his farewell in some way if he's actually going to step away for good. Which, by the way, I find it very ironic that one of his names is the Dead Man, and Vince McMahon will not let him leave, will not let him die. It's like he's never gonna go away.
No, I
And so
agree.
it's like
I think
he's not the Dead Man, he's the Forever Man and stuff like that. Lance mentioned an idea back when the retirement stuff started going around that the best send off for Taker, though, considering he's so iconic with WrestleMania, would be if he goes in the Hall of Fame the next night at Mania, he makes his entrance in full for the very last time. But I know he's synonymous with Survivor Series since that's obviously where he debuted and whatnot. So if he does something like that at Survivor Series, I guess it would be pretty fitting too. Because, Undertaker for the last few years, a lot of times his entrance has been better than his matches. And so if you just have him do that as the Dead Man, I do wonder if they're going to have some, mid-card heel come out and take the choke slam and the tombstone and whatever. They might do that. Something maybe similar to the John Cena match a couple of years ago at WrestleMania where Taker just does what he can do.
Yeah.
I think it'll be pretty good. It seems like they're moving in a good direction. And honestly, I've been watching a lot of the documentary stuff they've been doing, and it's actually been quite good. The one that I haven't seen yet that I'm looking forward to is the one on Paul Bearer. I've heard it's pretty good. It's about 55 minutes long, and they've never really done something focusing entirely on him.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting thing. I think looking at the whole thing with this, obviously Survivor Series, he debuted at the Survivor Series, obviously with Brother Love as his manager, Kane the Undertaker. For me, there's two queries I have with it. I think it'll be interesting to see whether they let him go out sort of without a fanfare, without fans being there. That's an interesting element. The other thing is, are we going to get a Terry Funk situation here where he just doesn't retire and he has another match? If this is going to be the case, the two candidates I see him potentially going into match 2 at WrestleMania next year, I could see him going against potentially maybe AJ again, because he obviously likes working with AJ. The other one, which seems a bit obvious for me, would be The Fiend. I think The Fiend versus Undertaker would work based on the whole dynamics of supernaturalness. I don't know in room whether it will be a good match, but can you see him having another match at Mania? Or do you think this is kind of his last sort of appearance?
No, the way I was saying that they're not letting him be the Dead Man, like they won't let his gimmick die. I do wonder if it's a Terry Funk situation because they had WrestleMania in Orlando 3 years ago, and when he took the gloves off after losing to Roman Reigns, we thought, oh, that's it, he's retiring, and so he's kind of already become a Terry Funk. It's just, I think at this point, Terry Funk has retired 47 different times in his career. So we'll see how, I guess in wrestling, because I've mentioned this before about my own career. The wrestling industry is hard to leave. It's like an addiction. It's like a bug. And so like when you step away from wrestling, it's hard to get that fix from anywhere else other than coming back into wrestling. And so I don't knock the guys too much for it, but I do think in wrestling, we should call it the Funkometer. So Terry Funk is the standard. He's retired the most and come back. Roddy Piper obviously did it a lot. Ric Flair has done it. And so, we'll see where Undertaker fits on that scale.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think an interesting sort of point, the last point I'd make on this for me would be that if he does leave wrestling, I've got an early prediction on this now. I could see him going into podcasting. I think he'll follow the Stone Cold Steve Austin route. I think that's going to be the next route. He's already started doing a lot of podcasts, and there were early rumors a couple of years ago when he kind of had this period away from WWE where he was going to start doing podcasts with people like Conrad Thompson and stuff like that. So I can see it. Another interesting thing, the last thing about it as well, I was going to say to you, Josh, I don't know if you're aware, early rumours about this appearance, apparently people such as Savio Vega are going to be on hand, members of the Bone Street crew. I think that maybe indicates that this is going to be a final send-off, potentially.
Yeah, I assume the Godfather will be there too, and some of the other guys who were in the Bone Street crew, and that's very cool. They've been, the Bone Street crew for the longest time was something, you saw the BSK on his stomach when he would take his straps down, but like no one really knew what that meant. But in the documentaries they've been doing on the network, they've started referencing, I think most even casual fans know about the Bone Street crew now, and so acknowledging that on the air would be entirely fitting. The last thing I was going to say is you mentioned him doing podcasts. I think earlier this year when they had him kind of transition out of the Dead Man gimmick and start acting a lot more like the American Badass, acting more like Mark Calloway, I think the purpose of that is so he can start opening up more about his career. And ultimately, because, for the longest time, they were talking about how you induct Undertaker in the Hall of Fame. And it's like, how does he come out and give a speech and preserve his gimmick?
Yeah, of
but
course.
If he steps out of the gimmick and kind of goes back to being, Mark Calloway, then when it gets to the Hall of Fame and he's giving his speech, it won't seem that surreal anymore.
No, I agree. I think I agree with all them points, definitely. Moving on then. So we then have got the Survivor Series qualifying match. This is to get a place on Team Raw for Survivor Series. And obviously on the men's team at the moment, we've got AJ Styles, Keith Lee, Sheamus and Braun Strowman. So the three men we've got Jeff Hardy and Elias. Obviously Jeff Hardy, former Continental Champion. Elias did well at WrestleMania this year, but it's been on a bit of a jobbing spree, so to speak, since he's returned. And then Riddle, obviously now known as Riddle, not Matt Riddle. And this,
Yeah.
for me, obviously they got 10 minutes. It was really, really good. Key things of the match, we got Riddle getting the pinfall after he hit the Bro Derek Slam on Elias. I thought this was a really good match. It really shows the great work that Matt Riddle's got. Matt Riddle has been turning it around. Obviously, clearly up until sort of he didn't have a very good October where he lost to Sheamus, lost to AJ Styles, but he's obviously in the recent weeks, like this week, he's obviously been really, really good. Happy to see him in the team, and I'm hoping this will be the start of a push for him. What was your thoughts of this match and the Matt Riddle change?
Well, the first thing we got to do is, I think, give you a shout, George, because wasn't that your idea last week to put Matt Riddle in? By the way, hold on. I'm going to offend everyone in WWE right now. That man's name is Matthew Frederick Riddle, okay?
Yeah.
I don't care about Riddle, so that he will always be Matt Riddle to me. But yeah, I think that was your idea, right?
Yeah, it was. Thank you.
So, and by the way, I said it was a great idea last week, and I think once he made it onto the team, the segments that we saw him in, I mean, Matt Riddle's such a hustler. He came out and did another match in different ring gear, and then we saw him, I don't know, you saw Raw Talk, right?
Yeah, I did, yeah. I did see this one.
The energy that Matt Riddle brings to that group, he's such a great addition to the team and the dynamic they're trying to set. So I think it's fantastic. Yeah. And hopefully, you know, I may have said this last week, the same way Keith Lee had his breakout moment last year in the Survivor Series match. Maybe this is Matt Riddle's opportunity to kind of, you know, take his career to the next level, seeing what he can do in an environment like that with so many well-known, reputable wrestlers.
I really hope so. I think he's got some fantastic talent. It'll be great to see him pay off that talent. And I think this is a good start. It's a shame he's had to drop the name, but as I said, fantastic. He's going to be in Survivor Series. Glad they chose the sort of to do that. I think that was a clever move. So Matt Riddle's now on, or Riddle is now on the men's Raw Survivor Series team. We then went backstage where we had AJ Styles talking to Charlie Caruso. AJ Styles was very happy to get Riddle on the team. Sheamus sort of showed up, and then he basically complained about Riddle. And then obviously we've got this whole sort of bickering that's been going on for many weeks. What were your kind of thoughts of this killing time?
So the bickering, and I guess we'll go ahead and kind of reference the match that happened later on too.
Yeah.
I did say I'm not a fan of seeing teams continuously fight every week, but I think they addressed that very well because they're going to have four of the guys in a match, and I loved AJ as the referee. But the intention is we need to get cohesive. So all this tension here, let's blow off all of this steam. Whatever you guys don't like about each other, take it out on each other in the match. And after the match, we're going to solidify ourselves as a five-man team. So I thought that was great.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was an interesting sort of way to do it. I guess it's a bit similar to last week, but the fact they're getting all the members in segments, which is clever. I like that. And I think it creates a question of who can trust who at Survivor Series, which is quite fun. We then went into a backstage segment. Ali was backstage with Retribution. Ali called Ricochet a good honourable man for turning down the Hurt Business, but he's a fool. Ali said Ricochet has to accept that he cannot change everything on his own. And Reckoning then did a promo, and she said basically everybody was laughing at them. Ali said the wrestlers are forgotten, but he went over their names and said they'll not rest until they shut every other wrestler down. What did you think of this promo?
It looks like they're trying to turn Retribution around. And
yeah,
I mean, Reckoning, she cut a promo last week on the network, and then this week they had it on Raw. Kind of, she's looking to go after Asuka.
Yeah.
So that would definitely push Retribution more up the ladder. And I mean, they're trying to give them something to work with, and it wasn't just a blow off having them attack Ricochet and Tucker last week, because now Ali, he's going after Ricochet. And it's like, we want you in our group, and we're actually offended that you're turning us down. And so we'll beat you into submission and have you join our group unwillingly.
Yeah, definitely. What I really liked about the segment is the carry on from last week, which is nice. It's nice to see the carrying on from last week. It's almost like that storyline thread is continuing, which is really, really good. It was great to see Mia Yim get that rare promo time as Reckoning. I want to see a lot more what she can do. We knew in NXT she was a fantastic worker, so that's good to see. And I'm really liking what they're trying to do with Ali, trying to turn things around here. So I thought that was a really good segment. Do you have anything else to add before we go into the next segment?
I just hope the momentum continues. I mean, I know I'm skipping ahead again, but I think Ali beating Ricochet was very important, because if Ricochet just shuts them down, then you've killed them once again. So I think they need to continue this thing. I mean, not just Ali, but have the other guys in Retribution too starting their own feuds, and going after the people, to where this 5-person group is taking over the company. Or is it 4 people now?
Yeah,
4 or 5? No, it's 5. It's 5.
Yeah, it's 5. Yeah. Yeah, it's 5. We then went on to the next segment, which was Drew Gulak, who's the 24/7 champion. He went up to the United States champion Bobby Lashley in the Hurt Business. Gulak suggested he wanted to join the Hurt Business. MVP, quality promo, said that on behalf of the CEO, Lashley, they're not accepting applications. Lashley grabbed the tie to reveal it was a clip-on tie. And then Drew said it was a tactical one. And obviously, because he has to run away as the 24/7 champion, the Hurt Business then do what they always do. They then attack Drew Gulak. We then got R-Truth creeping to win the 24/7 title for like the 44th time. What did you think of the segment?
I thought it was good too. I've said before that comedy does have a place in wrestling, and obviously that's a lot of the 24/7 title. I thought the whole segment was good. And by the way, I think what a lot of people didn't pick up on, the punchline to MVP saying we're not accepting applications, is that on Instagram, he's always saying they are accepting applications. Yeah. And actually, if fans will send him pictures of them wearing the Hurt Business shirt, he'll copy the picture and share it and say you're added, you're inducted and stuff. So it's like they are accepting applications. They just don't want Drew Gulak. I thought the whole segment was pretty good. Gulak, he played his part to where you really thought he thought he had a chance. He thought he was in, man. The pocket square thing where he puts some wadded up handkerchief in his pocket. The whole thing was good. R-Truth coming in. Yeah. It continued what we've been talking about. I thought everybody did their role very well.
Fair play. I think looking into it, I think it's great to see this level of comedy. It does belong in wrestling to a certain point. But they made MVP, and the promo was excellent. MVP just makes me laugh so much. He's so good on the mic, and he's such a natural. The Hurt Business almost in this tweener mode between good guys and bad guys, which is an interesting dynamic. But fun promo, and ultimately we got a new 24/7 champion at the end of it, which made sense. It was a good way to get the belt off Gulak to get it back to R-Truth. But no, there we go. We then had our next segment, which was Lana. Lana was coming out. She was due to have a match against Shayna Baszler. And it just obviously they showed the clip from before where Nia Jax has beaten Lana last week, and Jax has obviously put Lana through the table sort of 7 times now. So we then noticed that the lovely duo, Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke, were guest announcers for the match. So this was obviously a squash match. Didn't last very long. Shayna Baszler got the submission. What was your kind of thoughts of this match between Baszler with Nia Jax and Lana?
So the women's team has more of an issue than the men's team at this point, because there's still so much fighting among them. I mean, I did like the dynamic of Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke trying to be the voices of reason, saying, hey, we have to get on the same page. I thought that was very nice to add in. The only issue that I have with it, there is a way to fix it. That's kind of what I'll say. So the issue is, in that match, Shayna Baszler is very clearly not just trying to win the match. She's trying to injure Lana. She stomps on her arm. And it is weird. What's the logic there in trying to injure your partner on your team? So the way they fix it, and what I wish they would do, is I think Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax have referenced she doesn't belong on our team, we don't want her there. I think the way to really emphasize that is if Baszler and Jax, there was another woman on the roster they kind of brought in and said, look, Lana doesn't belong on the team. We're going to injure her and take her out, and she's going to be replaced by this person because she's way better than Lana. I think that would complete the whole argument that they're making. But right now, it still just creates too much of a vibe that they're trying to shoot themselves in the foot by taking one of their teammates out.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think you're spot on. I think the thing with it, a couple of key things here. I think the person that they should replace her with, it's obvious. I think you'll agree with this, is Peyton Royce. Peyton Royce would be far better than Lana on this team. I don't know what your thoughts on that before I go into the rest.
Yeah, but Peyton Royce or Lacey Evans, if Baszler and Jax brought her in like backstage with Lana there too, because I mean the angle they're doing, I don't know if this happened as much in the UK, but it's the classic high school setting. Basically, Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax don't want Lana sitting at their lunch table. You're not part of us. You need to go away. And yeah, it's just, if you're going to announce a problem, you should announce a solution. And yeah, I think Lacey Evans or Peyton Royce, if they brought her in backstage, it's like, this is what we want on our team. Lana, you're not a legitimate fighter. This person is. We're legitimate fighters, and you don't belong here. She does.
Yeah, I agree with all the points. I think the thing is, obviously, we then had the tease to go for the table again. This time it was Dana Brooke and Mandy Rose that made the save, obviously to try and,
Yes.
which was the hero thing to do. I get that. And it was okay. It was an okay segment. Did you have anything else to cover on that segment before I move on to the next part?
I just hope next week they do round it out by we finally get our payoff of seeing Baszler and Jax convinced. I mean, if they're going to actually keep Lana on the team, which I guess time will tell next
I think
week.
they are.
But if they
yeah.
do, sorry, if they do, then we need to see it kind of come to fruition next week that Baszler and Jax are convinced. Okay, we're going to have to work with her, and we're going to have to focus on Team SmackDown.
I think the go home angle for it, or not the go home angle, I think the angle at Survivor Series for me that's set is Lana's getting Nia Jax through the table. I think it's going to be role reversal. I think that's the big payoff. I think that's what they're going to do. I just hope the whole match isn't dictated by that one spot, because I think that would be a bit disappointing. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, that would be the ultimate comeuppance is for Lana to put Nia. Now, I will tell you, physically, I'm not sure how they're going to do that spot, but
It might be a couple of them. Maybe they could get Mandy Rose, Dana, and sort of Lana together to carry
do like
Nia,
a Shield
maybe.
power bomb or something like that. Yeah, that could work.
Yeah, no, definitely, maybe. We then had the next segment, which was obviously AJ Styles calling for a team meeting, basically. This was obviously what happened with this one is we had Jordan there again. He still doesn't have a name, so he's known as the Gigantic Associate, supposedly, which is a really one of the worst names ever. I think it's worse than probably the Yeti or something like that, or Zodiac, something ridiculous. So Styles welcomes us to the official Raw meeting with AJ. He's calling himself the phenomenal captain, and he said that with his leadership, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. We got AJ introduced Keith Lee. He then introduced Riddle, Sheamus, and Braun. Everybody's obviously there in their ring gear as well. All 5 wrestlers all had microphones, which was good. It gives them all the chance to say something. So Styles obviously said they all got off to a rocky start last week, and that's because they're missing certain pieces of the puzzle. They now have the missing piece in Matt Riddle. He said Matt, even though his name's Riddle now, which made me laugh. And then what we then had is obviously Keith Lee then cut off AJ Styles with basically saying that just generally that they were just all bickering again, which was basically them trying to basically come up with it. We then had Matt Riddle give them code names. This was brilliant. This really showed Matt Riddle's charisma, in my opinion. He gave names as Styles as the Skipper, Strowman as the Mongoose, and Lee as the Broly, and Sheamus team names Fireflies, which just made me laugh. And it was just generally a fairly good segment, really. I think what I liked about it, this was one of the first mentions of the night about the other brand. We got AJ Styles mention that SmackDown have got Jey Uso, which was clever. I like that because Jey Uso clearly is on a roll on SmackDown. So it's really clearly highlighting the point. There is another brand here. You are in a competition. And what they then said is Styles had a plan B with official Adam Pearce sanctioning this match. Styles then announced the match will be Sheamus and Braun Strowman versus Riddle and Keith Lee. AJ will be the guest referee. What was your kind of thoughts of the segment and the match announcement?
It's similar to what I said about the opening segment with, McIntyre and Miz and all those guys. Everyone had their part and played it well. I thought it was good. I liked the dynamic that AJ Styles is trying to kind of hold this pep rally where we get everybody on the team, team spirit and stuff like that. And they're tired of him saying he's the captain. You have the addition of Matt Riddle, and he's kind of playing. I sent you something before we started recording that a lot of what you see on TV is how Matt Riddle actually is. He's like, bro, I want everybody to get along. I got these names for everybody. I thought it was good. Yeah, each person did it. And then we get the match afterward that I talked about before. Obviously, this team's not getting along, so let's settle all this stuff and then get along after the match.
Definitely. We then had the match. The most important kind of part of the match is we got Riddle get another pinfall, second pinfall of the night. He managed to roll up Sheamus, which was a role reversal to a couple of weeks ago where he lost. So massive win. Riddle getting the win really shows he's on this push, which is great. I really like the element of it. It's strange to see all competitors against each other that are going to be teaming. But it was a fun match, and you've got a lot of sort of heavy hitters in this match. I really like the amount of time they're giving people sort of on TV. I think it was a good match, but definitely it's great to see Riddle get the win. It further solidifies his place on the show. Then after kind of the match, we then got Riddle and Lee celebrating the win. Sheamus and Strowman were kind of rowing, which makes sense. So Styles having to be a referee. What was your kind of thoughts of the match and just sort of anything else before I move on?
Yeah, so you talked about it just then, team members fighting each other weeks before Survivor Series is always not the best route to go, but I'm totally okay with it. if it's stated that this is the last time we're going to do this. And the point of this match is so we're not fighting each other anymore. AJ Styles also great as the referee. Every bit they've given him for the past few weeks in this team is great.
Definitely. I think sort of moving on then with this one. So we then had Alexa Bliss backstage with flowers. She took the pedals off and Nikki Cross walked up to her. Bliss said it's been ages since she's seen her, even though Cross said she saw her last week. Cross wanted to talk about The Fiend with Nikki. And Bliss obviously mentioned the Firefly Funhouse and said Nikki will get an invite soon. Cross said if she's a better friend, The Fiend would never have been able to get near her. And then it just keeps going on. Then obviously Nikki Cross then says, make a choice. It's either The Fiend or me. And Bliss basically chooses The Fiend. Flowers go everywhere. And that's kind of the end of the segment. So an unusual kind of segment to follow on from last week. It's very clever, the storyline they're telling. Nikki's obviously distraught for a friend. You do feel sorry for Nikki. Alexa this time was normal to a certain point. She isn't fully gone. She hasn't got this funny tongue. There's no metamorphosis like last week, which was strange. She hasn't got the contacts in either. And for me, this was a segment they threw together without any kind of real thought. Obviously, they were going to have a moment of bliss with Drew McIntyre that got kind of pulled early in the night, I believe. It's obviously a last-minute change. But it did what it needed to do. I would just like to have seen Alexa a bit more demonic. But the only thing you can do to kind of explain that is The Fiend wasn't kind of around. What's your thoughts of this segment and where it's going?
Well, I will say to what you're talking about, I think the reason why Alexa Bliss, just like Bray Wyatt, if she's going to get possessed by this same energy that Bray Wyatt is, the same way that there's the Fiend, there's the red sweater wearing Bray Wyatt, who's, I guess, closest thing to normal that Bray Wyatt's ever been. So the same way with Alexa Bliss, if she's got this demonic character, in the Firefly Funhouse, she needs an alter ego who kind of acts halfway normal. And I think the pigtail, like overall wearing girl picking the flowers is kind of that's Alexa Bliss's sweater wearing Bray Wyatt. I will say, here's my only thing. We've seen for a few weeks now these backstage segments where Nikki Cross approaches Alexa, tries to talk some sense into her, and Alexa Bliss kind of makes it clear that that's not going to happen. And so it does get a little redundant. I just watched Raw Talk before we started recording. We got much better development of that on Raw Talk because you have a Nikki Cross cutting this promo saying, what I'm doing so far isn't working. I'm going to have to take a different approach. And I think what we need to see in the next few weeks on Raw is Nikki not trying to talk to Alexa. She's like, Nikki needs to be more like, the real Alexa Bliss is still down in there. I have to beat it out of her. I have to physically drag my friend out of this demonic possessed thing. And I think we should have some kind of match to where the point is Nikki's going to knock some sense into Alexa. That's why, Nikki's approach of talking to her is not working. So I'm going to have to try something else. I think she almost said that verbatim on Raw Talk. We kind of could have used that segment on Raw. I think obviously Raw reaches a much wider audience than the network show does. That's what we need to see on the main show.
Yeah, definitely. I think an interesting thing, a couple of points I'd say. I saw that Raw Talk. I thought R-Truth was absolutely hilarious with the whole Nikki Cross thing, telling her to concentrate on chocolate rather than the actual problem at hand. The way Nikki Cross kept a straight face and carried on with the promo. Credit to Nikki Cross. I thought it was brilliant. And I think the dynamic's interesting. What I would ask, my last question before we move on, Josh, with this one, is do we still see Alexa doing this full form sort of metamorphosis into a female type thing, or do you think it's going to be a slow transition where really it's still a baby face at the end of it, really?
Wow. Yes and no. So I do think that we're observing this continual dissension of Alexa Bliss into the dark side, but from everything we're seeing, Alexa Bliss and Bray Wyatt are being booked as baby faces, especially because you can do it. I mean, we're seeing a little bit of that with Drew McIntyre and Sheamus to where, in their own segments, they're respectively babyface and heels, but they still get along. I guess you could do it to where the Fiend is fighting the heel, so he's a babyface. Alexa Bliss is fighting babyface girl, so she's a heel, but they're still a duo. And Alexa Bliss still pops up in the Fiend's segments with whatever guy he's feuding with. You can have that balance, but I will tell you, long term, that is a very difficult and, dare I say, impossible line to walk. If I had to guess, I think that despite the feud with Nikki Cross, Alexa Bliss will stay as I won't say babyface. They are their characters. Yeah, tweener's a good way to put it. They're characters, and they fight against the heels to where the fans will pull for them, but nothing about their nature is a babyface.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for that. We then went into the next segment. So we had Bobby Lashley. He was in the ring with MVP. There was a big announcement about him facing Sami Zayn for the Intercontinental Championship of the Survivor Series. And what he basically said, he said that he's basically going to turn Sami Zayn into a human ragdoll. I like that. There was another mention of the brand. I thought that was clever again. And there was a nice mention about sort of how from MVP. MVP did another promo where he said the Hurt Business will beat Woods and Kofi next week, so it won't be the Street Profits versus New Day at Survivor Series. It'll be the Hurt Business, which was nice. I like that. Building up next week as well. We then had Tyson O'Neil show up, and he said like a couple of weeks ago he asked to join the Hurt Business, and it was basically turned down. MVP said he has respect for Titus because of his charitable work that he does with children. He'll give him one opportunity to walk away. Titus said he won't walk away. Titus asked Bobby, "What's the point of having the title if you don't defend it?" Lashley said, unlike MVP, has no respect for Titus. Lashley said, if you want a title shot, let's do it now, basically. A couple of points from the promo. I thought MVP was brilliant. I love the one-liner about the charity work. I think he's just so good on the mic in terms of getting it over the opponent. If that makes sense. It's really strong. It really fits with the Hurt Business and the whole gimmick. I think it's really good. What was your thoughts this promo before we get into the match?
Yeah, I know I kind of sound like a broken record, but it is a continual thing we're seeing throughout this episode of Raw that in each segment, each person has their own individual, character, their wants, their needs. I like the fact that even though they're both in the Hurt Business, MVP came at it from the angle of, oh, look, Titus, I respect you. I don't want you to get beat up. Please walk away. And then Bobby Lashley comes in and says, I'll beat your ass right now. And, I like that. They're on the same team, but their personalities are different. I also like, and I think it's the way you build up the Hurt Business, is we saw it with Drew Gulak and now we see it with Titus O'Neil. You have this ongoing element that people want to be in this thing, but it's closed off, it's restricted, you can't be in our club. That elevates the Hurt Business to a position of status.
Yeah, definitely. I think another funny one-liner before we get into the match, MVP took a fantastic one-liner one-shot where he said the match will be above the ring, not beneath it. That was a nice Greatest Royal Rumble reference. Did you get that one? It was brilliant. I thought
Absolutely.
It was really
funny. I think most people picked up on that. Obviously, Titus O'Neil's most infamous career moment, which we're getting off topic here. I've had so many arguments with friends of mine in the business over whether that was meant to happen or whether it was a complete accident. And we could never really agree on whether. I don't know. I mean, we can't take up too much time talking about the Greatest Royal Rumble, but if you watch the footage in slow motion, Titus O'Neil is looking at the ring apron as he's running down. But one of my friends, who's actually he's I won't spoil too much, but he's in NXT UK and will be making his debut soon. He's adamant that the whole thing was a total shoot. That it was. So we don't know. We don't know.
That's interesting. It's funny to hear. We then went into this match. So Bobby Lashley totally destroyed Titus. It was in like an under 1 minute. What I've noticed, I don't know if you've picked up the observation, Josh, is besides Roman Reigns and also Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley's one of the most protected people on the roster. This guy's win streak is phenomenal. Clearly, he has outgrown this belt, hasn't he?
Yes, absolutely he has. And I think I said this in last week's episode. I think the reason for keeping Lashley so strong is because he ultimately will be back in the main event world title picture. And so, yeah. By the way, I wanted to point out something else too. In terms of all of the inter-brand matches, I never thought we'd see the day when the IC title versus US title match is the one that gets talked about the most. We've seen the most promos from Sami Zayn and Bobby Lashley talking to each other, across the shows. We've had a couple of segments with the other people with the Street Profits and New Day. As far as I know, Sasha Banks and Asuka have not said a word about each other. I know Randy Orton and Roman Reigns have not said a word about each other. So, yeah, in terms of all of those matches, that's the champion versus champion matches being talked about the most on air is Lashley versus Zayn.
I think it's the most obvious match as well for a winner. Lashley all day long, but great to see Lashley get this push. He's done some fantastic work to build himself back up, and he clearly is the Rock in almost the Hurt Business, if that makes sense. He's the leader, really. I think it's really, really good in terms of that. But no, fantastic win for him. As he should be, exactly.
As he should be. Yeah, I mean, like a Nation of Domination comparisons there. Obviously, we'd say MVP is the Farouk, and Lashley is the Rock. And, I mean, hopefully his career can elevate from this stable the same way the Rock's did.
Perfect. We then had another segment, which is a nice continuity from last week. Drew McIntyre was shown backstage with Sheamus, saying he wanted Drew on the Survivor Series Raw team. Drew suggested maybe don't bro kick your partner off the apron. Sheamus said he deserved it. Sheamus talked about despising the guys on the Survivor Series team, and Drew's partners, the New Day. Drew then did a New Day clap. Sheamus wasn't happy about that. Sheamus says he wishes they could team up like the old days when they kicked everybody all over Europe. Drew said they had fun kicking heads, drinking kegs. I like the quote. It was good. That's going to be a shirt one day. Sheamus then said that, how about we go out for a drink after? Drew talked about if he gets his chance to win back the WWE Championship, they'll have lots of pints of whiskey, courtesy of the new champ. Sheamus laughed. Sheamus said it would kill. Sheamus told him to kill it as Drew warmed up for his match. What's your thoughts on this segment?
So it's not even a bad problem to have. You know, as wrestling fans, you kind of like being surprised. So I'll tell you straight up, I don't know where they're going with this. I'll tell you my two biggest guesses. So could it be possible that Orton keeps the WWE title and we do see other challengers come against him? So then McIntyre, this might ultimately lead to McIntyre and Sheamus actually teaming up. But I think the more likely direction is that McIntyre stays in the WWE title picture. And what you see is Sheamus wanting to team up with him. And there's eventually comes a point to where he's like, you know, you've forgotten about our friendship. Sheamus, as a heel, attacks McIntyre, and it leads to some kind of feud with those guys.
Perfect. While we're on the subject, I'm going to kind of jump ahead with that now. So obviously next week we are going to have the world title match, which will be Randy Orton versus Drew. This is my money shot now. I'll put it out there now. I think the finish of that match next week is Sheamus is going to turn on Drew. I think that's the kind of obvious one for me. There's no way that I don't see Drew leaving next week with a belt. The two choices were The Fiend, or it was going to be kind of Sheamus. The Fiend is going towards a babyface route. I think the whole thing with Alexa Bliss kind of keeps him as a babyface to a certain point, so I can't see them doing that, although that'll be fun. But I think Sheamus will cost Drew the belt next week. That's kind of my prediction for that main event next week. As we're based on the subject, what's your kind of thoughts of that taking place?
So yeah, you could go ahead and do the turn next week with Sheamus, and he cost it. The question then becomes, though, does McIntyre get involved in Sheamus's match at Survivor Series and, you know, cost Team Raw? I mean, you could go. I mean, I'll tell you what I was thinking about the Orton-Reigns match. As we've said, Orton and Reigns have not once acknowledged it on the shows.
No, definitely
so
not.
I'm thinking, so basically, I still don't think that we're going to see a straight match with Orton versus Roman Reigns at Survivor Series. So what I would like to see McIntyre win it next week on Raw, and then we get Drew McIntyre versus this Samoan tribal chief Roman Reigns at Survivor Series. That would be a great match. But I think we might have Sheamus turn on him. I also think that if Orton keeps the title, what we have is not a straight match with Reigns and Orton. We have a match to where maybe McIntyre is involved. Maybe you have The Miz kind of cashing in and stuff like that. You might even have, you know, even though he's got another match, you might have Jey Uso coming out trying to protect his cousin. So you have all these people coming out in like an ensemble match. I guess is what I said about the McIntyre Sheamus thing. I'm not sure where they're going with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing is, if you're going to do this whole Roman Reigns Drew thing, I think doing it with only a week's build is a massive throwaway. I think although it's an epic match and they're good enough it's going to be a fantastic match, I think this is one of them you need to build up because, as I said earlier, these two are two of the most protected people on the roster. They don't win matches, and it's almost like throwing away Goldberg versus Hulk Hogan on Nitro again. It's almost you're doing it.
But they've done it before. I will say they've done it before. Remember a couple of years ago we had. For weeks, you even had Paul Heyman cutting promos on Jinder Mahal when Brock Lesnar was the champion. And then I think it was the go-home episode of SmackDown, AJ Styles beat Jinder for the title. And so you had this dream match of AJ Styles versus Brock Lesnar with no build-up at all. So, like, it wouldn't be the first time, if they do McIntyre versus Reigns, it wouldn't be the first time they've done that. I think sometimes WWE does stuff like that to try to create the vibe that anything can happen. But I'm not sure if it will. Sorry. I'm not sure if it will.
No problem. Okay, yeah, I think it'll be an interesting match. I think the whole dynamic of it can make it a fun thing to see, but we'll see. Kind of moving on then, we've then got the next segment, which was Asuka versus Nia Jax. This match was a bit flat. I think Asuka did the best she could. She got the win by disqualification. They're clearly protecting Nia Jax here for some. I guess she's the women's tag team champion. But what a horrible segment. The DQ finish, but it kind of did what it kind of needed to do. What was your thoughts of this segment?
It wasn't the best, but in their defense, you kind of had to do that. I mean, if you're going to have, I mean, you could just say don't have this match and that would work. But no, if you're going to do the match, you kind of have to do a DQ finish because Asuka's got her match with Sasha Banks. You can't have her lose. When Asuka locked Nia Jax in the Asuka lock, I thought Nia was going to submit for a second. Yeah. And I was like, this is not good. Like you have the women's champion beating one of the key members of Team Raw like 2 weeks before the show. That's not good. So, I mean, you kind of have to do a non-finish almost.
No, definitely. I think what happened next was kind of interesting. We then post-match had Dana and Mandy going after Baszler because Jax saved a partner. Lana then basically turned up again. And once again, Lana went through the table for the 8th time, which was deja vu. I know certain people, I know Steve that watches these videos absolutely loves Lana going through, but for me, I'm kind of done with it. A key thing in this segment, I don't know if you was aware, apparently Nia Jax injured Mandy Rose in part of this segment, which is another wrestler injured, unfortunately. What's your kind of thoughts, these wrestlers in this segment kind of getting injured?
I just found out the last thing you said. I mean, I know that Nia has not had the best reputation backstage because she's injured other people. Yeah. So that's not good long term for her. But yeah, so I will tell you, you said your friend Steve likes it. I think one person who likes the Lana table spot, and the reason we keep seeing it, is Vince McMahon, because Vince has always had these things to where if he can do something, he gets on this kick where he wants to see how many times he can do it. And it's just like, it's Vince entertaining himself because he just finds it amusing. So let's have it happen every week. There's so many sticks that have been done like that, especially on Raw. I could list 100 of them.
Yeah, definitely. I think the key thing with it is I think clearly WWE think it's that Lana's got this big baby face reaction when they do go back to fans, but it's a strange way to get a push. That's all I would say. But we then went kind of back to another segment. Angel Garza did another promo where he says he fights for his heart on his sleeve, and he's fighting for every woman in the world. This one wasn't particularly about one woman, it seems. So he's obviously changed direction. And based on what you said to me last week, I've kind of looked into it a bit more. It is fun. It's a fun segment. I just hope it leads to him in the ring. I'm a fan of vignettes and stuff, but I think he's a talented wrestler. So I'd rather see him wrestle rather than just having these promos really, which may not go anywhere. What's your thoughts?
I'm going to say it again. I just don't know where they're going with it. Yeah. I've said that 3 times on this show now. But yeah, because here's the thing about doing, especially in 2020, doing this like womanizer type gimmick, is that what's the payoff? Because we don't really see intergender wrestling in WWE. But I think if you had it, that would be a good dynamic. But see, with the politically correct stuff and the PG rating of WWE's product, you can't really do these intergender matches where he's wrestling this woman and pulling these like overtly sexual moves on them. If this were 2000, that would be par for the course on Raw. But it's 2020 and all this stuff coming out, people would get offended by that. And they would see it as very insulting to the female wrestler in there with him. So you're going to have him, I guess he's going to be fighting men, but if he's this womanizer, what's his motivation to fight these guys in the ring? I don't really know. So, and the main thing is, going back to what I told you about Angel Garza, not everything they put him in, I'm saying is the best. I just think he as a performer makes the most. He makes the most out of what they're giving him.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a fair point. We then went to the 24/7 title. This was a mega match. We had R-Truth, Lince Dorado, Gran Metalik, Akira Tozawa, Drew Gulak, Eric of the Viking Raiders, and then Tucker, just Tucker now, not Tucker Knight. This match was just a throwaway. It was comedy. It filled TV time. And R-Truth is the 24/7 champion again, basically. There was various people winning the belts here. Very much reminded me of the Crash Holly kind of WrestleMania moments where the belt's changing at a frantic pace. I like the way that it got everybody on the show. I just think it would be a shame with this 24/7 title, really. I would love to see them put in more of a hardcore element so it's got that sort of uncertainty rather than just be a match for the sake of it, really. What was your thoughts of this and the title changes?
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. I mean, for some reason, I guess because of the concussions and stuff, they're much more leery of using weapons in matches nowadays, but there should be more of a hardcore. I mean, technically, they've never flat out said that 24/7 impromptu matches are like, regular rules. Like, obviously, their falls count anywhere. I would assume they're no DQ as well. I liked it. Hold on, I gotta ask you, what is the rating for your show? Is there a rating on it? Because
what the overall rating? No, it's fine.
No, like the language, the language rating.
Whatever.
So here's it's a beautiful clusterfuck is what this match is.
Yeah.
It's stupid. It's insane.
Yeah.
I still find it entertaining. By the way, dude, we were talking about Tucker last week. Jobber number 47 has 2 title wins now.
Yeah, that's
He
true.
won.
2 more than before.
It was so dumb,
Yeah.
but I watched it and I was laughing while I was watching it. The roll-up spot with Gulak and Tucker, where they're rolling back and forth and Tucker becomes a 2-time champion in the middle of a small package.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. It was so dumb.
Yeah, no, it's dumb. It's fun. I get you need to have light-hearted fun. It does what it needs to do. That's kind of all I've got to say about that segment. Is there anything else you want to add before we move on?
I don't want them to overkill it, but I do think we need more stuff like this out of the 24/7 title. Maybe not a 7-man match every week, but more of this. If you're going to have a title that can be defended anywhere, have it change hand. The title means nothing. It's literally not even on the champions list on WWE.com. So who cares if it changes hands 10 times in a night? If there's ways to do it right and there's ways to do it well, and I think it should get a little more of what we saw from it this week.
Yeah, no, well said. We then went on to the next match. It was Mustafa Ali with Retribution facing Ricochet. What a fantastic match. These two can definitely go. Some of the highlights of the match, there was a fantastic Phoenix splash off the top. Nice Koji clutch submission as well on the arm. And it was just a really, really good match. A lot of near falls. And the fact we didn't really have the outside interference, I was amazed how talented both these two wrestlers were. They really, really surprised me. When I saw sort of the elements of it, you're thinking they've both been booked like total jokers, really, so it weren't going to be good. But the time they got, it was actually really, really kind of fantastic. What did you think of this match?
So that's what surprised me the most is I think we had at least 1, maybe even 2 commercial breaks during this
14
match.
minutes.
So they had so much time, and it did give both of these guys who haven't been booked very well a chance to redeem themselves. It was, I don't know if you ever watched this show, but it's not promoted very well, but it does have decent quality wrestling. It was a 205 Live style match on Raw. And for them to put that on there was great. And both guys really shined with that opportunity. One thing I will say with the finish, I was so happy to see, but I like how he's not Mustafa. If he keeps correcting people, he's Mustafa Ali.
Good.
He's like, pronounce my name right. And so Mustafa Ali is using the Koji clutch. What I like about that is that's a move that he can put on anyone regardless of their size. And so if we see Retribution going after other people, that's a submission hold that he can lock on to Drew McIntyre. It's a move that he can put on Randy Orton. Something that I don't remember if it was Lance or someone else told us is if you're a smaller guy in wrestling and you want to make it in WWE and be a versatile performer, come up with a finishing move that you can hit on the Big Show. Because if you can hit it on the Big Show, you can hit it on anyone. And the Koji clutch fits that criteria.
That's really interesting to hear from sort of what Lance Storm taught you as well. Looking at the match as well, I thought it was really, really clever. Key thing, obviously, that Ali got his win back. This was a guy that was going to challenge for the world title previously but Kofi Kingston obviously took that spot. What I'm interested in and what I'm interested in your views in, Josh, is where they're going to kind of go, because they've obviously got Ricochet now, been beaten down. I think what they need to do with this Retribution and Ricochet element of the feud, I think Retribution and Ali need to stop beating people. They need to beat like 4 or 5 people in a row, and then you need to form the 4 or 5 they beat as a team against Retribution, if that makes sense. If you get 4 or 5 other wrestlers that they beat, you really could have this gang warfare, including maybe a female as well. I just thought that the wrestlers outside of Retribution just were kind of spare parts, which was a shame. But it was great to see Ali get that win. They're really rebuilding it. I just really hope that he's not back to losing next week. But for me, if they do change Ricochet and he joins them, that'll be a good addition. What's your thoughts?
So something very subtle, I don't even know if it was intentional. I like the dynamic. If you notice, Ricochet was wearing these black and white tights. And so when they're all in the ring beating him up, Ricochet's ring gear already matches everyone in Retribution.
I didn't see that.
And so, yeah. So like if it's like, I was looking at him getting beat down, looking at his gear, and I was like, man, if he joined, he fits right in with them. So I don't know if they could go ahead and have him just join it. Yeah, but what you said is crucial. So one thing, Ali himself needs to keep looking strong on the show. He needs to keep getting wins. I think adding T-Bar and Mace into the tag title picture would be good. They need to get some wins. We have Reckoning going after Asuka pretty soon, I think. That leaves Slapjack. God loves Slapjack. I don't know what you even do with him. But yeah, all of the people in the group need to kind of, it's like the NWO back in the day. Each person has their own feud going on, and then at the end of the day, they come together as a group, but each person's looking strong. we need to see that for Retribution.
Yeah, well said. I agree with all that. I think it'll be interesting where they go. But no, I definitely would hope to see what you said, really. We then moved on. We then had a great promo backstage. Randy Orton was told by the WWE official, still not general manager, Adam Pearce, that he's going to have to defend the title against Drew. Orton grabbed Pearce against the wall, and Pearce telling him he's only the messenger. Orton told Pearce to tell the staff he can go to hell. Pearce said he acknowledged that. I like that. It was a great segment to build up next week. I love how angry Randy is. That really fits that Randy was lucky to get the belt. And they, as I said before in last week's show, Adam Pearce, this guy needs to be GM, doesn't he?
What is Adam Pearce? Yeah. But I will say the intensity we saw in the opening segment too. I like this, intensity from Randy Orton. And that he doesn't like. I mean, it's a classic heel thing. How dare you put me in title matches as the champion? Like how dare you? I'm Randy Orton. You're gonna just randomly throw me into a title match next week. How dare you be disrespectful like that? Because Randy Orton, he's one of those people who, when he's booked as a heel, 90% of his career when he's a heel, he believes that he's the good guy. He believes that he's in the right. And these baby faces coming after him, they're the ones in the wrong. How dare you come after me like this? I'm Randy Orton. And so, yeah, it was good. I liked his attitude throughout the whole show.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a big match to announce for next week, as we said earlier in the podcast. We then went on to the main event. So it's Drew McIntyre, Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, the New Day Tag Team Champions, Randy Orton versus The Miz and Morrison. Interesting match. It did what it kind of needs to do. Drew McIntyre obviously getting the pinfall here. He got a big win. What I liked about it was Randy didn't get involved. Randy was very clever. Kept himself away. It was almost like a handicap, which, let's be fair, if you were Randy Orton, sensible to do because you've got The Miz there. He's a threat to your title. You want to sort of challenge it. And then we obviously had Drew kind of get the pinfall. Drew obviously pinned Morrison, much more sensible choice than last week. But this was obviously a good main event match, and this match just kind of ended with Orton and Drew kind of staring at each other. That was kind of it. What was your thoughts on this match and the main event and the way it ended?
It was good. And so what I liked about it is we saw the opening segment where it looks like Orton and Miz and Morrison, Orton's been convinced that he can work with them. But then the minute he learns that he's got to defend his title next week, Orton's like, screw this. Like, this match is a waste of time. These partners of mine aren't even worth giving any effort into. I'm going to hang on to the apron. I'm going to save myself because these idiots backstage have thrown me into a title match next week. So I want no part of this. I thought it was good. Yeah, I mean, it was the payoff to the opening segment, and it paid off well. Drew McIntyre, the obviously top contender for Orton's title, got the win because when Orton walked away, we saw McIntyre beat them both last week. When McIntyre walked away, Miz and Morrison were just sitting ducks for McIntyre and the New Day.
Definitely. I've only got one last sort of point on this before we kind of give the show a rating. For me, there was one key thing missing throughout the show. I don't know if this was as apparent to you as me. I felt they didn't do anything with the Fiend. Like, they've been teasing this whole Fiend thing for many weeks. Yet there was no mention really of him on the show, apart from Alexa Bliss earlier in the night. What did you make of the missing part of the Fiend? I thought it would have been a good way for him to come in and potentially maybe attack both, because you really don't know. I know the match next week is Orton versus Drew, but there's still that question about the Fiend there. Really.
Yeah, we need to see him next week. I mean, if we don't see him next week, that's 2 episodes that he's not popped up. And so even someone of Bray Wyatt's caliber, you don't have him pop up, he will be forgotten about.
The only thing I would say as well with The Fiend is if you're planning on sort of historics and the story and stuff, I guess if it is him that cost Drew the belt next week, it wouldn't really make sense because he should hate Orton because Orton's up when he burnt down the compound. Would you be a fan of this kind of Fiend versus Drew feud potentially, or Fiend versus Randy at TLC?
I think Fiend versus Randy Orton would be good. Yeah, I would be into that. Yeah, I mean, Fiend versus McIntyre, I think they're going to have him more as a babyface. I'm talking about Bray Wyatt in terms of him fighting the heel, so I'm not sure. I guess they could do it. The problem with Fiend versus McIntyre, though, is if you do them versus each other, one of them has to lose. I don't know. Man, that's tricky.
Yeah, what I really like about the show ultimately compared to last week is they've built a lot of stuff for next week. Next week, to me, feels almost like a WCW Clash of Champions. We're getting a lot to look forward to. We're getting that world title match, which is epic. It's been main event at SummerSlam. It's been main event various times. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. We're also getting a tag team title match between the Hurt Business and the New Day. That would be fantastic. Obviously, we've seen that match before, but it'll be good. Any predictions kind of for next week in terms of the tag team titles? Where do you see that going?
So I'm all for the Hurt Business becoming tag champs, but I, as a fan, want to see the New Day versus the Street Profits, so I hope they don't win it. Yeah, it's very difficult because I don't want to see the Hurt Business lose to the champs again, or, I mean, actually, they beat them before. But no, I wouldn't want to see the Hurt Business get flat out beat by the champs because it kind of kills that. I just don't want to see, because the Street Profits were just on Raw. Hurt Business versus Street Profits, that was a match we could have seen months ago. Yeah. New Day and Street Profits have never interacted before. This is that dream match we're talking about. And I will have a certain level of grudge against WWE Creative if they take that match away from us only a week before Survivor Series.
Definitely. I've got a long shot for you. I wonder if you'd be a fan of this. So if I was booking it, what I would do, it's maybe controversial, the finish of this match, which is the tag team titles on Raw this week, I would actually have it so that one of the New Day and, say, Shelton Benjamin both pin each other. It's a double pin. Then that way you can make it a triple threat match at Survivor Series, which makes it a bit different. I know it's not Raw versus SmackDown. It'll be Raw versus SmackDown, but in ring, that would be fantastic. Would you be a fan of something like that?
What I would be more a fan of is have some sort of, have Xavier Woods pin Shelton Benjamin, but Benjamin's foot's under the rope.
Yeah.
So Hurt Business have a claim that they need a rematch. Have Street Profits versus New Day at Survivor Series, and the Raw immediately after, you want to have a rematch and Hurt Business win the titles, go for it. I am all for Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin winning the titles. I just don't want them to do it before Survivor Series.
Perfect, I agree. I think, so give this rating a show. What would you give it out of 10?
So we haven't done this before, so to contrast from like last week's, I would have given last week's a 3 out of 10. It wasn't very good at all. This week's, I could go 7, maybe even 8 out of 10. It was a noticeable improvement.
Yeah, definitely. I'd definitely say 7 or 8 is fair. I think they're doing a good job. It was a fun show. The show wasn't a chore to watch. The time they spent was fun. I enjoyed it. Was there anything else you want to add about the show before we go into a bit of Survivor Series talk briefly? And NXT?
Raw is, if you watch it live especially, can be very brutal to sit through. And I mean, to give WWE a little bit of credit, I used to host a show that was like a 10, 15-minute show bi-weekly. And the work that went into that. I mean, Lewis, when we did BLW, we did a 2.5-hour show every 3 and 4 months, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. To give WWE a little bit of credit, booking a live 3-hour TV show every week, there is a lot of work that goes into that, and it's hard to expect absolute perfection every single time. With that said, that was the fastest 3 hours that I've had in a while. The show flowed very well. It wasn't, as you said, a chore to watch it. It was actually fun to watch and very enjoyable.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think if I was going to give it a rating, definitely would go with a 7 or 8. It was fun. They did a lot. The fact that Riddle's going to be sort of getting the push, that's a great choice in my opinion. I enjoyed that. They tried some different stuff, and they really did what I asked for WWE, being a fan for so many years and watching it back in the Attitude Era and everything else. They always used to do a good job of next week, but up next week, so you've got something to look forward to. They did that this week, so excellent to WWE. Credit WWE. Going into kind of the Survivor Series briefly before we cover NXT. So the big question really on Survivor Series at the moment is we look at the 5-on-5 women's elimination tag team match. Clearly, Team Raw, we know the members. SmackDown, there's obviously still only 2 members. Is it just me, or is it pretty obvious we're going to get Bayley in this match? This is a spot where Bayley fits in.
They could definitely go that route. Yeah, I'm glad that I didn't want to see Bayley versus Asuka. I'm glad they had Sasha keep the title on SmackDown, so that match is happening. And then, I do think that Bayley will come in and join the Team SmackDown. It'll be interesting. I mean, this is the latest developed team out of the men's and women's matches that SmackDown still has to come together, because of all the other teams we've seen them put together completely, especially on the Raw side. And so, Bayley and who else would you put on there? I'm curious.
Carmella's obviously, she's due to have a feud with Sasha Banks based on last week's SmackDown, so she'll have to be on the pay-per-view in some form. So I think that'll get her on the pay-per-view, so that's one. And I think the other ones, it's a coin toss, really. If you're looking for another 2 people, so we've got Bayley, we've got Carmella, one more. It comes down to one of 2 people for me. It'll either probably be Selena Vega or Natalya. Natalya's a good worker, and Selena Vega, they seem to be sort of using her quite a bit. What's your kind of thoughts on them people?
Yeah, I think that would work. And we would see maybe, I mean, if they do the last few qualifying matches on Friday, we'll see about 2 weeks of how those teams can come together too. Hopefully, I will tell you, hopefully they don't go the same route that Raw went. Yeah. So we're seeing both Team Raw and SmackDown doing the overdone dysfunctional family angle.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be back next week, obviously, with predictions going into kind of Survivor Series. We'll get your final predictions and stuff. But let's kind of go on then. So, the last thing tonight before we kind of wrap up the podcast, just going to do a brief talk about NXT, just a couple of kind of questions and stuff. Obviously, NXT over the last 2 weeks for me has been probably the best show. It's been really, really well built. They've got loads of angles, loads of stuff. They've done a fantastic job of introducing a new stable and the Kings of NXT and stuff like that. I'm just going to go into a couple of key things on the show and just get your kind of thoughts, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so obviously this week we had a massive win where we had a big shock. Dakota Kai beat Ember Moon. What was your kind of thoughts of them beating Ember Moon when she's returning, she's losing? That was kind of a big shock.
I was surprised. I thought, I mean, the way they brought back Ember and I assume they were booking her strong. They had Dakota Kai beat her, and I know Meltzer was talking about it looks like they're putting Dakota Kai into the women's title picture. And so the question becomes, Dakota Kai is a great performer and stuff, but the question becomes, where does this leave Ember, you know? Is she gonna be in the picture too? Is it gonna be multiple women going after Io Shirai? I don't know, but yeah, that Dakota Kai getting the win shocked me.
It's great to have a shock occasionally, but I think the thing with it is the whole Ember Moon thing, ever since they've done these vignettes where she returned previously back at the takeover, the gimmick that she's got doesn't fit the vignettes, as I said previously on other podcasts, and it's they've not really treated her like sort of like she's coming from somewhere higher, but it's a shame really. I really hope that they start giving her some momentum because she's in ring, she's fantastic. I'd like to see her be up there, but it's something different. We then kind of went into sort of a match between Drake Maverick and Killian Dane, the best friends versus Everrise. Obviously we got a finish from the Kings of NXT. And they're really sort of beating people down, which is what I like. What's your thoughts on this forming of this stable of Kings of NXT and how they're built? I've been really impressed.
I have been a Pat McAfee fan for the past couple of years since the WWE brought him in and had him on their NXT, like the TakeOver pre-shows and stuff. What I originally thought they would do is they would have him as a color commentator eventually. And I think he's hilarious. I thought he would be great in that role. But it turns out after seeing his whole feud with Adam Cole in the payoff match that he gets the business. He's not going to be AJ Styles or Shawn Michaels in the ring. He's a football player turned broadcaster. But Pat McAfee does understand the wrestling business, and he understands how to play a character. He understands how to cut a promo, and he understands how to be a good storyteller in matches. So yeah, Pat McAfee is wonderful in everything that we've seen him in. Yeah, and I think that having him as the mouthpiece for some guys who haven't gotten, I mean, especially the only working in Danny Burch, neither one of those guys are the best promos, so they need someone who can talk for them. Pete Dunne, I think Pete Dunne can cut a decent promo, but having someone talk for him the same way that MVP talks for Bobby Lashley is good. I like the stable.
I'd give WWE some credit compared to what they've done on Raw and other shows. Considering obviously they had the injury, that injury to Ridge Holland, the way they've come about the stable and thrown it together and replaced Pete Dunne with Ridge Holland, really well thought of. It's totally the opposite of Retribution, to be fair. They've done a fantastic job of building this brand new stable, and you've got them attacking another one. What I loved about what they did on NXT, they set obviously they set the Universe Undisputed Era's kind of flag on fire, which I thought was genius. I thought that was really good. Shame there wasn't a real crowd, loads of people to witness it. There's obviously some people, but not enough really to make a real noise. But and I really like the ending part where they basically slammed the door in Killian Dane's face, and then almost like Pat McAfee's like, "Oh, you shouldn't have gone so far." And I really like the way they're making them almost kill it. Why would you say sort of they've been able to do this compared to what they've done with Retribution? Why have they been able to build this stable up much better?
It's tough to say. I assume Pat McAfee's status outside of wrestling, the fact that I think it was Bleacher Report that he's worked for, like Pat McAfee has an audience that's not a wrestling audience, and so there is a little more of an incentive to have him on your show because you get a few crossover people who will check out NXT just because this guy, they know Pat McAfee's on there. I mean, he also he was a punter for the Indianapolis Colts. And so there's certain football people. I think he's always had a charismatic personality. So there's probably football fans who liked the promos, if you will, that he cut back when he was playing football. And so, yeah, Pat McAfee has a little more of an outreach, I guess, than the guys in Retribution do. There's more of an incentive to have him be on your show and have him be well developed on your show. But besides that, it's tough to say. I mean, there are different people booking NXT than there are booking Raw. And so it could just come down if there's just different ideas floating around.
I look at it as two things. A, the length of the show is much shorter, and obviously you're not going to have to probably get Vince to approve. That's the main thing. But I think the key thing where it's going is ultimately we're going to lead to War Games, which has been built excellent, really. I'm really looking forward to it. So you're looking at Undisputed Era versus this stable, which is going to be fun, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it will.
Yeah,
It will.
we then had this next segment. So we had Johnny Gargano with a person with a screen mask next to him. They're playing a game. I thought it was hilarious. Early predictions on this. Then who's going to be in the mask? Who do you reckon?
So there's a lot of debate over whether it was the same person in the Scream mask for the whole episode of Halloween Havoc,
Yeah,
or if it was a man who interfered in the Johnny Gargano match, but then it was a woman who came out during Candice LeRae's match.
yeah,
I know Indy Hartwell has been talked about as being the one. And so it could just be that Indy Hartwell has been it all along and she was helping out. Indy has this obsession with the Gargano family in general. You could go that route. You could go that there's actually two people in there, that there is a Scream guy and a Scream girl. I'm not sure who the guy would be, but I did mention this to you in a message. I can guarantee you in the Damian Priest Johnny Gargano match, when the Scream person came out, to quote Austin Powers, "That's a man, baby."
yeah, no, definitely. Do you see them doing a long shot where obviously Gargano's got his title shot on tonight's NXT? Do we see him kind of actually challenging the person Scream Mask and the Scream Mask unmasked, and it'd be Damian Priest just to kind of throw Gargano off the scent a little bit? Maybe.
It would be good. It would be good. And I know that Dave Meltzer was talking about that too, but the elephant in the room is that Damian Priest is a literal elephant in the room, in the sense that how do you have this almost 7-foot tall Scream person come out and then Johnny Gargano is surprised that it's Damian Priest? Yeah. Damian Priest is almost impossible to disguise in a room.
The other long shot I've got for you, I'll throw it out there. The other one I would say, I would have said Indy Hartwell, but the other one I'd say maybe, been written off TV at the moment, is Austin Theory. Austin Theory is due to come back again, and it gives him something to do. What do you think?
Yeah, that would work. I mean, you can't do too much of the same thing to where we've seen Indy Hartwell has this obsession with Candice LeRae or the Garganos. You couldn't do it to where Austin Theory is equally as obsessed with Johnny Gargano, but maybe it's like Theory needs someone to give him the rub. You know, he had that little cup of coffee with Seth Rollins in his stable, and it's like Theory's looking for someone to kind of elevate him, and he's gone after Gargano because they're both heels, and so it could be Theory saying, Johnny, you do whatever it takes to win, and I need you to show me how to take my career to the next level.
Definitely. We then go ahead with kind of one of the most intriguing segments that's going on NXT at the moment for me. They've done a really good job. No one knows what's happening. We've got this whole Xia Li thing. So Xia Li was backstage. She goes on about the letters she's been getting from Boa. And she says the letters are from her family, they're personal, but she needs a match against Gonzalez. Been built up for weeks and weeks. Nobody has any idea where this is going, I don't think. What's your thoughts? Have you got any prediction? I'll give you mine after.
Do you remember how they don't do it as much anymore, but there used to be these insane stakes in wrestling matches to where like people's lives were on the line, or, you know, there's these big organizations outside of wrestling and a wrestling match will settle some sort of huge dispute, whatever. The vibe that I'm getting from this is that Xia Li, her family is somehow at the mercy of some Chinese mafia that Boa represents. And this mafia is holding her family in some sort of position of disadvantage to where Xia Li's performances and her matches determine what happens to her family. Like, I typed this to you a few weeks ago and it sounded ridiculous. I'm saying it right now and it sounds so absurd.
No, not necessarily.
Like, yeah, but I'm saying the idea sounds absurd. The fact that someone might have actually pitched that backstage at NXT, I'm like, what the hell, man? I don't know. I don't know what we're going to ultimately see with this.
I'll tell you what this reminds me of. It reminds me a bit of WCW back in the early 1990s. I don't even remember this, when we had Sting feuding with he was getting stalked by somebody. Somebody hired an assassin to take Sting out every week, and it was a big question mark, who did it. It's a bit like that. I think the thing with it, what I'd like to see it go is, I'd love to see it be that every week somebody comes in from this supposed stable or wherever to take out Xia Li, or there's that thing. The only thing you can think of is Xia Li needs to win matches to send the pay home a little bit to pay off this mafia. As you said, that would kind of make sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if WWE have got the interest to do that, but it's definitely fun. I just hope they continue with it and they pay it off soon. I think we need to now find out this week, when she loses to Gonzalez, probably what the consequence of that is, because there doesn't seem to be any consequence. But the last thing I was going to say about NXT, which I did miss, I've jumped ahead a bit, is when we saw Shotzi Blackheart reaction to a tank going. And for me, best acting of the year. I couldn't believe how much emotion it was. It was almost like a sort of a real life tragedy, unfortunately. But what an actress! What did you think?
So Shotzi's great at everything. Yeah. I mean, the same thing I said about Angel Garza. The content they give Shotzi to work with, she's a great wrestler. She plays her very unique character, which the same thing that I said about Matt Riddle. I get the vibe that a lot of what you see from her on NXT is the way that she actually is as a person. I've never met her before, but I assume. And yeah, I mean, she's a great actress. so it's the same thing I said about Garza, to where she did well with what they gave her, but the idea itself might not have made as much sense. Why is she so emotionally attached to this tank to the point that she would have a mental breakdown in the ring and have to be comforted by the person she just beat, or the person who just beat her, Toni Storm? There needs to be because I think the announcers did reference that Shotzi cares about freedom and the tank represents American freedom. That's never been referenced before. Nothing about Shotzi's gimmick in the past has been that she's this the symbol of American freedom or whatever. So I don't know, but she did well with what they gave her. Yeah.
I think the only thing you could say is maybe they will do the whole thing of maybe a granddad or a relative gave it to her and it's sentimental down that road. Maybe that will make sense. But yeah, definitely. I think it's fun. They are definitely building some good stuff on NXT. Just kind of before we wrap up the podcast this evening, have you got anything else you want to cover?
No, we were talking about Survivor Series. I wanted to talk really quick about the men's match because we've seen everything with Team Raw. Team SmackDown right now is a very interesting situation because, with Team Raw, you have baby faces and heels. You've got very clear baby faces in Keith Lee and Matt Riddle. Braun Strowman is kind of a tweener, but, he had his farewell match on SmackDown with Roman Reigns. He's been fighting heels too. And then you have the two heels in Sheamus and AJ Styles. SmackDown right now is literally Kevin Owens and the heels, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't know who that fifth man's going to be. I'm wondering if it'll be another babyface or if it's literally just going to be KO and 4 heels.
I don't want to state the obvious. I know he's maybe selling kind of an injury. Could you see it being Daniel Bryan, just to add to that whole Jey Uso Daniel Bryan dynamic, to further lead on to that next match maybe? That would be the babyface you need, I would say, if I was going to call it and predict. Or we're going to get probably just Chad Gable. That'd probably be it, as I said last week. But
he could be the Matt Riddle of that team, to where he's some guy who could really use that status. I mean, what I hope we see, if it's Daniel Bryan, I like the idea of Team Raw. They've blown off all of their issues and they're working together. Yeah. So you have a solid Team Raw against Team SmackDown, where with Kevin Owens, Jey Uso, and Daniel Bryan, it's like, how are these guys ever going to work together? You've got the intrigue of Seth Rollins having his own agenda the whole time. Baron Corbin has always been selfish, so how can he be a team player? Yeah, that would work.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Was there anything else you want to add?
No, man, we've addressed pretty much everything. I enjoy, this is a good problem to have. I find myself watching as a fan, wondering with a lot of these where we're ultimately going to go. And I mean, as cliche as it sounds, that's what keeps you watching, right?
Yeah, it does, definitely. I appreciate you coming on, Josh. Thank you again. We'll have to definitely do predictions next week if you're up for it. We'll come back next week. We'll discuss probably this week's Raw, the titles, predictions for Survivor Series as well. Really appreciate you coming on. So this has been Jonesy Chats Wrestling. Thank you for watching.